As some may know, I knit. Having learned as a child, it was years and years before I once again took up the knitting needles for our UU caring crafters. From those very simple prayer comfort shawls with row after row after row of knit stitches, until now, when a lace pattern might still be a challenge but doesn't send me running in the other direction. I find I gravitate towards designers that have intentionally incorporated mindful living into their patterns. There is Christina Campbell, an Iowa professor of nutrition, who hosts an annual Peace Knit project in which thousands of knitters around the world work on a new pattern each December. Or Céline Leroux, a French designer whose most recent creation is called Pause, in which she encourages knitters to do just that. She says what we all know to be true, but seldom pay attention to. In our society where everything is always going 1,000 miles an hour, where you need to keep up to stay in the race or be left behind, the idea of taking a pause is crucial. When information can be exchanged at the speed of light, it's really precious to be able to make and take space and time just for yourself. It's about taking control over your life, your mind, and your physical body, to really listen to yourself for once and to take care of yourself. So while searching for just the perfect yarn for Celine's new design, paired with this summer's worship theme, beauty, and this Sunday's service theme, breath, a lot came together in my mind. So I ask you to take a pause, take a breath, as I read our chalice lighting, Breathe With Me by Susan McGinn. You who feel sorrows calling across the oceans, calling across the room, echoing in the spacious cavern in your chest, breathe with me. You who wake with the sun carrying a restlessness to make justice and do mercy, breathe with me. You who walk humbly accepting that your gifts for the world will be made by you, you a soft creature who must pause for meals, water, laughter, and rest, breathe with me. And you who sing by heart songs of peace, hope, joy, and love this world into a home, breathe with me. Two readings. The first, Breathing by Mark O'Brien. Grasping for straws is easier. You can see the straws. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you, presses down upon me at 15 pounds per square inch, a dense, heavy, blue, glowing ocean, supporting the weight of condors that swim its churning currents. All I get is a thin stream of it, a finger's width of the rope that ties me to life. As I labor like a stevedore to keep the connection, water wouldn't be so circumspect, water would crush in like a drunken sailor, but air is genteel, teasing me with its nearness and pervading immensity. The vast circumambient allows me but 90 cubic centimeters of its billions of gallons and miles of sky. I inhale it anyway, knowing it will hurt in the weary ends of my crumpled paper bag lungs. And Breathing Landscapes by Muriel Reichseyer. Lying in the sun and lying here so still, an egg might slowly hatch beneath this still hand. The people pass. Although they nod, they smile, trailed in the air, silence follows their faces. I know, lying, how the hills are fixed and the day moon runs at the head of the fixed hills. Nothing crossed the field all day but a bird skirting the tall grass in the briefest transit. Their stern ideas are a long work to each, and even armored, we hardly touch each other. The wind leans, the air placed formally about these faces and thoughts in a formal dance. Silence hangs in the air, nothing speaks but the sound of certain rivers continuing underground.
If you were to look at the earth from the sky, she said, right in this very part of the earth, the shape of these sacred hills would be in the shape of a heart. Not a Valentine or a Hallmark heart, but a human heart. These hills, she said, have for centuries been beating with a rhythm of sacred life. We were gathered in a hall filled with people of many generations, nationalities, ethnicities, with known and unknown stories of connections and histories, being offered the gifts of truth and storytelling and dance and music from a Lakota woman at the visitor center at the Crazy Horse Memorial in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The skill and ease that she used of weaving together this joyful levity with a purposeful teaching of hard stories to this group of people from all over the place, all these tourists with their cameras and their bags and their maps and their brochures, she wove together this joyful levity and hard truths of her people in this place. It was impressive and impactful. She spoke of the matriarchal tradition from which she came and the symbolism in the dances, the symbolism in what she wore, including the belt to hang with various tools and bags because of the tradition of women taking care of almost every task, which she joked has never ended. There was something about the combination of the complex, hard history of this place, the artistry and craft and spirit of the dancing and the rhythm and movement, the mixture of these people from who knows where, and the invitation at the end to join in a large circle, which to some of us felt like church, but to all of us felt sacred somehow. And we danced the circle dance with hopes for reconnection and reconciliation, restoration of the sacred hoop of humanity, where peace and justice prevail. One of the most beautiful connections with this trip and my family was when we stopped on our way home in Chamberlain, South Dakota, a rest stop that some of you may be familiar with that overlooks the Missouri River. We stopped there on the way out and the way back every time. One of my daughters noticed something she hadn't on the way out when we were on the way back earlier in the week. She looked up at Dignity, a powerful statue about 50 feet tall of a Lakota woman standing atop this valley. And my daughter looked up and said, I wonder if she's doing the fancy shawl dance. She has a belt, just like the woman we saw dance. She had learned something new. Not only the facts of a dance or a wardrobe, but you could see on her face she had learned something to notice and look upon a person from another culture with wonderfully different customs and traditions, and to name it and to know it as sacred, as beautiful, as normal. There is, of course, much more complex histories for the Lakota people and our family's place in it as descendants of European immigrants in that history. And yet there was a reminder as the tall grasses blew along the interstate there, and I recalled the words of this great new teacher to me. It was as if the earth and the sky and the air in my breath were connected in some sacred rhythm of how we share the air and how we wonder about what invitation there is to each of us What reality, what possibility is there for everyone to be able to breathe freely and gladly and openly? I wondered if we could find some deeper hope and deeper truth in our world that starts with the simplicity of noticing another's difference as beautiful. The air is genteel, writes the poet, teasing me with its pervading immensities, miles of sky. I breathe it anyway, knowing that it will hurt. Breath isn't always about breathing easy. It isn't always about the quiet, meditative, contemplative practice. Sometimes it is more about critical survival. It's about knowing that this world is painful and knowing that the air we breathe is filled with the breath of history and conflicts. It's filled with toxins, both biological and spiritual, creating more of a smog than fresh air sometimes. Sometimes it can be hard, exasperating to pause and take a breath, because often the hard question then is, once I breathe, what comes next? What do I do with that breath? What do you do with this breath, this rhythm of life? How do you spend and use that energy and that possibility that you've been given? How do you heal a hurting world? How do you mend a broken relationship? How do you tend to your own broken heart that is in the shape and rhythm of the beauty and brokenness of the Black Hills themselves? Sometimes the air we breathe is hard. The news cycle, news spoken and unspoken, unless you really search for it. The demands of discerning how to find your own breath and voice among the countless needs for healing and reconciliation and resistance in this world. Even listening to the debates among the field of 1,400 or so presidential candidates, it's exhausting to watch and to listen to these debates. It feels like there is no breathing room for context, for true listening. And I get that that's the format, but the format becomes some competitive sport, and it feels like everyone is exasperated, including me, gasping and grasping for air and space and air time. But the problem with the debate is not just the debate itself. It's a symptom of a freneticness and fracturedness of our world, gasping and grasping for air and space and time, when too often it all seems so fleeting. At Chalice Camp this summer, we gathered in this room. Chalice Camp, which many of you know, is our summer camp for children and youth. We had the chairs stacked against the wall, and we gathered here in the center in a circle with mostly young people, children and teens, and we started each time with this. They'd come in from the sides, and this is just before lunch, which is a hard act to precede. And so they gathered, and we had some markings on the floor, so they gathered in an arc, and we said this as they came in: find your breath. So I'm going to ask you to do that. Find your breath. Maybe it's here, maybe it's in your diaphragm. Find your breath. It was a recalling that we are made of breath, that every moment we are an embodiment of breath and life, and sometimes we just need to slow the heck down and feel and notice that we are alive. Think about the moments in your day as you feel and listen and pay attention to your breath. When are the times when your breath feels distant and you're distracted and hardly aware of it at all, disconnected from the rhythm of your own life, the rhythm of your heart? What pulls you away from breathing deeply and intentionally? And then think about what brings you back. What moments or people or places or practices bring you back and remind you to connect, to remember that your breath is connected to the sacredness of the world around you, that is also teeming with life, moving in rhythm like hills in the shape of a heart, reminding us of our connection to all living things. Find your breath. And most of the kids did, most of the time. Earlier this summer, I entered our house and couldn't understand why the main floor was so warm. Sure, it was summer and there was some sun coming in the windows, but it wasn't that hot out, it seemed. So we turned the air conditioning on to take the edge off, and it seemed to help upstairs, but all day, more and more, the main floor just wouldn't seem to cool down. So randomly walking down the hallway, I notice our old, almost rotary-style circular thermostat on the wall. It's something I don't normally look at in the summer because it's turned off, because it's for the furnace and the boiler system. Something else had happened. Little did I know that someone, somehow, in the busyness of these last day or maybe 2 days, must have accidentally brushed up against the wall, turned it on, moved the thermostat, which was now engaging the boiler to try to get up to 90 degrees. And now all of a sudden I was in this epic conflict between the air conditioner and the baseboard heat. It was some microcosm of climate disaster fighting against each other in a battle neither could win. The boiler was kind of winning. But the discomfort of the day and the environmental guilt of the realization of what was happening, that we were unintentionally pinning together two powerful systems of energy consumption, didn't feel good. But what a truth it told to me in retrospect of intent and impact. Sometimes we just brush up against something unknowingly or ignorantly, and we change the atmosphere, the very air we breathe, and all of a sudden the impact that we never intended or thought could happen creates conflicts that we don't even perceive. You can't see it like you can grasping for straws. And while we were able to mitigate the damage fairly quickly, it took a while for the air to change. Friends, I don't know about you, but I feel like we do this all the time in this world. We, as in humanity, we brush up against something with no intent to harm, but the impact is real. That happens with actions that unintentionally privilege some over others in hiring, in wages, in assumptions of social realities and norms. This happens with words and comments, questions and critiques, bringing to bear our conscious and unconscious biases in ways we never meant to harm. And the best we can do is not to dwell in despair or guilt about the harm that we cause, but once recognized and realized, whether we come to that realization on our own or someone offers us a gift to tell us about something we have caused harm in. Perhaps the best we can do is to take that knowledge as a gift of awareness where we can apologize, acknowledge harm done, and then do whatever we can. Opening windows, turning on fans, or simply trying to notice and feel in different ways to make amends, to try to move forward in some better way. Sometimes to notice more closely what we need to do to adjust in our lives, you have to slow down and take a moment and pay attention to the very air we're breathing. This past week, as some of you know, 10 of our high school youth, with 3 fearless chaperones and me, ventured on a spiritual pilgrimage. Some of us are still recovering this morning. Me and Derek and Erica. God, fearless people showing up today. It was a journey of heritage and holy sites in our tradition's history in Concord and Boston, Massachusetts, the cradle of American Unitarianism and Transcendentalism, mingled in with Universalism if you knew where to look, including our national headquarters and meeting the president of our association in the hallway, and several historic churches and buildings and sites and ponds, and more strikingly, I might say, and most moving, grave sites. So a brief commercial. In 2 weeks, August 25th, these youth will be presenting the Sunday morning service and offer reflections and photos from their trip. Then later that night at 6 o'clock, they will have a dessert reception and presentation down in the Commons so you can come and learn about their travels. We intentionally called this a pilgrimage because it was a sacred journey to holy sites. So we visited grave sites of Louisa May Alcott, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Elizabeth Peabody, who basically became our patron saint along the way. And we found the graves of prominent Universalist preacher Hosea Ballou and women's suffragist and all-around hero for a better world, Margaret Fuller. Using our inner spiritual sense along with GPS coordinates and maps from findagrave.com, very helpful, we found. We made our way through Sleepy Hollow Cemetery earlier in the week, and then later in the week, Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, to find Ballou and then Fuller. After Ballou, speaking of the large-hearted love of universalism, declaring all people beloved, we spoke of how these graves are not just those who have died, but their spirits, their essence, their teachings, their legacy are mixed and mingled with the living. Like the words in the song from Sweet Honey in the Rock, the dead are not under the earth. They are with us in the breeze and the rain and the groaning rocks and the sun. We spoke of these people not just as dead people, but as our ancestors, and in this case, our spiritual ancestors. And as we made an intentional silent pilgrimage between graves, walking like transcendentalists walked as a spiritual practice, one could feel the presence of ancestors, finding their way and making a home in this new generation of young people. Their spirits lived in the air. Their legacy and teachings and presence, as some of our youth spoke of later, felt so close, supporting and sheltering our pilgrim journey, as if breathing that air was in fact letting their spirits become part of ours. So we gathered at the graveside of Margaret Fuller, and as some found places to sit, others to lay down, some in the sun and some in the shade of a tree among the rolling hills of this land for all souls, we read these words from Sister Margaret. All around us lies what we neither understand nor use. Our capacities, our instincts are but half developed. Let us be completely natural before we trouble ourselves with the supernatural. I never see any of those things. But I long to get away and lie under a green tree and let the wind blow on me. There is marvel and charm enough in that for me. I love that phrase. There is marvel and charm enough in that for me. A powerful reminder of the marvel and the miracle of the common, the everyday, the natural, the ordinary moments and experience of not only the natural world, but our natural, ordinary lives of which we and nature are connected. These simple, sacred lives we live. When we breathe the air of our ancestors. When we breathe the air of all lands and people spanning time and space and culture and history and herstory. The Lakota teacher and dancer, when she spoke of her culture and of shared hopes for humanity, she used a phrase that stuck with me. I want us to know. I'm a little more familiar with hearing, I want you to know. Someone telling you something. I love that phrase, I want us to know. There is in that phrase a sense that shared knowing, shared understanding is not only helpful but critical, essential to building better communities and better worlds. There's an expansiveness in that phrase that brings us out beyond just ourselves, brings us out beyond what is comfortable or normal to us, helps us become more aware of the beauty and the diversity in this world, and to humbly and gladly hold each telling of those stories as sacred. So what do we want us to know? How do we find and catch our breath in this world? How do we take a breath and a moment to draw it in like it will save our life, because it does every day? How do we find our breath after it's been knocked out of us when something in life is terrifying or hard or broken? What I want us to know is that in each breath we draw in the spirit of our ancestors, we draw in the breath of our neighbors, we exhale what will become the air in the lungs of our descendants. And the quality of that air in every phrase and sense, the quality of its toxicity or its health and wholeness to the body and the soul, whether it's going to be filled with nutrients we need or chemicals that will kill us, filled with words and teachings of justice and liberation, or filled with actions and teachings of exclusion and greed and individualism and self-protection and bigotry. What is the air we have been given to breathe, and what are we breathing back out? How are we creating the air for those who are yet to come, the next generation and 7 generations beyond? What I want us to know is that the air we draw in and the air we leave out is a sacred gift, a sacred responsibility. It is made of sky and stars and ancestors and hopes and dreams. The same air in this world is drawn in and sent out by all people who dwell here, by those in power and those without, those with privilege and those without. And I want us to know that the largest impact of climate change and global hate speech filling our air falls on the marginalized most. It is a spiritual imperative for any person of goodwill or ethics or heart to know that sacred air is breathed on both sides of the border. There is sacred air in the lungs of the parent and the child who have been separated by evil. Sacred air that is breathed by those who care about that and those who don't. We share this air. And if we're paying attention or we have others around us to remind us, if we aren't directly impacted ourselves, we know the cost is too high to our shared humanity, our shared survival of making a home for all souls to knock the air out of some and save it for others. I want us to know that with every breath we are given a chance to breathe into being justice and love and hope. So find your breath. You're going to need it in this world, and find a rhythm that will nourish your heart within the sacred rhythms of this earth and strengthen you, a breath that will strengthen you for your work beyond just your self-preservation, so that there's enough sacred air in this world for all of us. Now you guys are comfortable to join a hand next to you. Place your hand over your heart. Breathe deep the breath of life. Take a deep breath. And then think next, when you are strong and resilient and nourished by that breath, what comes next? Sometimes it's yells of resistance and protest. Sometimes it is words of encouragement and comfort. Sometimes it is simply telling those near you they are loved, sacred, and beloved by you. May it be so.